I stood there in the middle of the wedding reception, surrounded by chatter and clinking glasses, feeling the weight of 13 years pressing down on me like a heavy coat I couldn't shake off. The music was loud, the kind of upbeat tune that made people sway without thinking, but all I could focus on was her. Olivia, my ex-wife, strutting toward me like she owned the place. She hadn't changed much, not really. Her hair was still that sharp blonde, cut just above her shoulders, and her eyes had that same glint, the one that used to make me feel small. I'd loved her once, loved her so deep it hurt, back when we were young and dumb and thought forever was a promise we could keep. But then the tests came, the doctor's visits, the endless waiting, and when we couldn't have kids, she turned on me. She'd sit across the table, her voice cold as ice, saying it was my fault, that I'd let her down. One day, she just packed her bags and left, spitting out words that cut deeper than any knife. "You're not a real man if you can't give me a family." That was it. 13 years ago, she walked out, and I hadn't seen her since, until now. The wedding was for an old university buddy, someone we both knew back in the day, and I'd come expecting laughs and nostalgia. Not this. She spotted me across the room and made a beeline, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor like she was marching into battle. I braced myself, hands stuffed in my pockets, trying to look calm even though my heart was pounding. She stopped a few feet away, smirking that smirk I used to dread, the one that said she'd already won. Well, she started, her voice dripping with that old condescension. "Still single, right? Figures. No one to tie you down, no responsibilities." She paused, flipping her hair like she was in some movie, then went on. "My life's different now. I've got Richard, successful, handsome, everything you weren't. And our son, Caleb? He's a genius, just like his dad. Top of his class, plays piano like a pro. You should see him." She laughed, a sharp little sound, and I just stood there, letting her talk, letting her build her little tower of pride. I could have interrupted, could have said something to wipe that smug look off her face, but I didn't. I waited, watching her bask in what she thought was her big victory over me. She kept going, throwing out details about Caleb's grades, Richard's business deals, how perfect her world was now that she'd left me behind. I nodded along, keeping my face neutral, feeling the old anger bubble up, but holding it back. Then, when she paused to catch her breath, I saw my chance. I turned slightly, just enough to glance over my shoulder, and raised a hand in a small gesture. "Nice," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Here's my son." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, simple but heavy, and I watched her face change. Her smirk froze, then melted away, like someone had flipped a switch. Her eyes darted past me, landing on Adrian standing a few feet behind, chatting with some cousins near the dessert table. He's 12 now, tall for his age, with my hazel eyes and a grin that's all his own. Olivia's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her hands, the ones she'd been waving around so confidently, started to shake, just a little at first, then more as she took him in. I could see her mind racing, trying to make sense of it. This wasn't part of her script. She'd spent years telling herself, and anyone who'd listen, that I was the failure, the broken one, the reason we'd never had a family. And now here I was, standing tall, with a son she couldn't deny. "Adrian," I called, casual as anything, and he looked up, flashing that easy smile of his before walking over. He stopped beside me, hands in his pockets just like mine, and I put an arm around his shoulders. Olivia's eyes flicked between us, her breath catching like she'd forgotten how to breathe. "This is my boy," I said, looking right at her, letting her see every bit of pride I felt. Her face went pale, the color draining out like water from a cracked glass. That confidence she'd worn like armor? Gone. Shattered. For the first time in all the years I'd known her, Olivia looked lost, like the ground had dropped out from under her perfect little world. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. The truth was standing right there beside me, living, breathing proof that she'd been wrong all along. She stammered something, a half-formed question maybe, but I just smiled, small and tight, and let her flounder. Adrian tilted his head, curious but unbothered, and I could tell he didn't get the weight of the moment. Not yet. But I did. I felt it in my bones, the satisfaction of watching her crumble, not because I'd planned it, but because life had a way of setting things right. She'd left me thinking I was nothing, and now here I was, whole and happy, with a family she could only dream of breaking. The music kept playing, the party kept spinning around us, but for that one moment, it was just me, my son, and Olivia's stunned silence. And damn, it felt good. 13 years ago, I thought I had it all figured out, standing there in my cheap suit at the university chapel, watching Olivia walk down the aisle in that white dress that made her look like something out of a dream. We were the perfect couple back then, or at least that's what everyone said. She was the loud, bright spark, always laughing, always pulling me into her orbit, and I was the steady one, the guy who'd follow her anywhere. We'd met in our second year, bonded over late-night study sessions and bad cafeteria coffee, and by the time we graduated, we were inseparable. Marriage felt like the next step, the natural one, so we did it. Young, full of hope, believing love was enough to carry us through anything. I remember holding her hand that day, promising forever, thinking we'd build a life together, a house full of kids and noise and messy, beautiful chaos. But life doesn't care about promises, and when the kids didn't come, everything started to fall apart. At first, it wasn't so bad. We'd been trying for a baby for a year, maybe two, and when nothing happened, we just shrugged it off. It'll happen when it happens, I'd say, kissing her forehead, and she'd nod, smiling that tight little smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. But then the months turned into years, and the doctors got involved. Poking, prodding, running tests that left us both drained. I'd sit in those sterile waiting rooms, holding her hand, telling her it'd be okay, but the news was never good. They couldn't figure it out at first, just kept saying unexplained infertility, like that was supposed to make sense. Olivia started to change after that. The smiles faded, replaced by this quiet, simmering frustration that I didn't know how to fix. She'd snap at me over nothing, burnt toast, a late night at work, little things that never used to matter. I tried to talk to her, ask what was wrong, but she'd just shake her head and say, "You wouldn't understand." I didn't, not then. Her family didn't help. Olivia's mom, Mrs. Hayes, was the worst of them, this tall, bony woman with a voice like a whip. She'd come over for dinner sometimes, sit there picking at her food, and then start in on me. "A real man gives his wife children," she'd say, looking at me like I was some kind of failure, her lips pursed tight. I'd grit my teeth, try to laugh it off, but it stung. "You're wasting Olivia's time," she'd add, glancing at her daughter like they were in on some secret I wasn't part of. Olivia wouldn't defend me, not once. She'd just sit there, staring at her plate, letting her mom's words hang in the air. Her dad wasn't much better, quieter, sure, but he'd nod along, muttering about how a family needs a legacy. It was suffocating, like I was drowning in their expectations, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't swim to the surface. I kept pushing, though. I loved her. God, I loved her. And I thought if I just held on, we'd get through it. We tried everything. Diets, pills, some weird herbal tea that tasted like dirt. I'd drive us to appointments, sit through the awkward silences, tell her we'd figure it out together. But the more we tried, the colder she got. The passive-aggressive digs started creeping in, little jabs that cut deeper every time. "Maybe it's you," she'd say one night, staring at me across the kitchen table, her voice flat. "Maybe you're the problem." I'd laugh it off at first, tell her we were a team, but she didn't laugh back. The blame settled in, heavy and unshakable, and I started to wonder if she was right. The tests never said it was me, not for sure, but they didn't rule it out either, and that was enough for her to latch onto. Then came the day she broke me. I'd been at work, a long shift at the warehouse where I was pulling extra hours to pay for the treatments, and I came home to find her sitting on the couch, bags packed by the door. She didn't even look up at first, just kept staring at her hands, twisting that ring I'd given her years ago. "I've met someone else," she said finally, her voice so calm it didn't sound real. I stood there, dumbstruck, the air sucked out of me. "What?" I managed, but she just kept going. "He can give me the life I deserve," she said, standing up, smoothing her skirt like this was some business meeting. "I can't keep waiting for you to fix this." Fix this. I wanted to yell, to ask how I was supposed to fix something we didn't even understand, but the words wouldn't come. She grabbed her bags, looked at me one last time, those eyes I used to drown in now hard as stone, and walked out. Just like that. The divorce papers came a week later, cold and official. ending us with a few signatures and a court date I didn't even fight. She was gone, taking every dream I'd had with her, leaving me alone in that empty house we'd once filled with laughter. I sat there that night, staring at the walls, wondering how it all went so wrong. I didn't cry, not then, but I felt it, this ache that wouldn't let go. She'd blamed me, her family had blamed me, and part of me started to believe it. 13 years ago, she walked away, and I thought that was the end of me. Turns out, it was just the beginning. After Olivia left, I was a mess, no point in pretending otherwise. I'd sit in that quiet house night after night, staring at the TV without really watching, just trying to figure out where I'd gone wrong. The divorce had gutted me, left me feeling like half a man, her words and her mom's echoing in my head. You're the problem. A real man gives his wife children. I'd loved her so much, poured everything into us, and when she walked out, it was like she took my whole world with her. But I couldn't just sit there forever, drowning in it. I had to move, had to do something, so I threw myself into work. The warehouse job wasn't glamorous, lifting boxes, driving forklifts, long hours with sweat and sore muscles. But it kept me busy, kept my mind off the empty spaces she'd left behind. I'd come home exhausted, crash on the couch, and do it all again the next day. It wasn't a life, not really, but it was survival, and that was enough for a while. Then Lucas showed up, my best friend since university, the guy who'd stuck by me through all the crap with Olivia. He'd call me up sometimes, check in, but I'd always brush him off, didn't want to talk, didn't want to feel. One night, though, he wouldn't take no for an answer. Get off your ass, he said, banging on my door like some kind of lunatic. We're going out. You can't hide forever. I grumbled, told him I wasn't in the mood, but Lucas is stubborn as hell. He just stood there, arms crossed, until I gave in. So I dragged myself off the couch, threw on a clean shirt, and followed him to this little bar downtown, all dim lights and sticky tables. I figured I'd have one beer, shut him up, and go home. But then I saw her, Sophia, sitting at the bar with a friend, laughing at something, her dark hair catching the light just right. She wasn't like Olivia, not even close. Where Olivia was loud and sharp, Sophia was warm, steady, the kind of person who made you feel like you mattered without even trying. I didn't talk to her that night. Too nervous, too rusty, but Lucas noticed me staring and shoved me toward her a week later when we ran into her again at the same place. Hi, I said, feeling like an idiot, my hands sweaty in my pockets. She smiled, this soft, easy smile, and said, hi back. We talked about nothing at first, just the weather, the beer, stupid stuff, but it felt good, natural. She was a teacher, loved books and kids, had this quiet way of pulling me out of my shell. I didn't tell her about Olivia, not then, just said I'd been through a rough patch. She didn't push, didn't pry, just nodded like she got it, and that was that. We started seeing each other, coffee dates, walks in the park, dinners at cheap little places where we'd split the bill. She never made me feel small, never threw expectations at me like grenades. With Olivia, everything had been a test. Prove this, fix that, but Sophia just let me be me. 2 years in, I knew I wanted her forever. I proposed on a whim, no big plan, just took her to our favorite spot by the river one evening, got down on one knee with a ring I'd saved up for, and asked. She laughed, tears in her eyes, and said yes, and I felt something click back into place, something I thought I'd lost for good. We got married in a small ceremony, just family and a few friends, nothing fancy, but it was perfect. I remember looking at her that day, thinking I'd finally found my footing again. Then came the shock. Barely a year into our marriage, Sophia sat me down one night, her hands fidgeting, a nervous smile on her face. I'm pregnant, she said, and I just stared at her, my brain stuck like a broken record. Pregnant? Me? After all those years with Olivia, all those tests, all that blame, I'd half believed I couldn't have kids. You sure? I asked, my voice shaky, and she nodded, pulling out the little stick with the plus sign, laughing as I grabbed her and hugged her so tight I probably squeezed the air out of her. 9 months later, Adrian came, red-faced, screaming, perfect. I held him in the hospital, this tiny bundle with my eyes staring back at me, and it hit me like a truck. I wasn't infertile. Never had been. All those years, Olivia had pinned it on me, and I'd carried that weight, but here was proof. Living, breathing proof that it wasn't true. Adrian grew fast, stubborn, and smart, always asking questions, always pushing boundaries. He'd build these crazy Lego towers, play tunes on this little keyboard we got him, and I'd watch him, amazed at how much of me I saw in him. My eyes, my grin, even my temper sometimes. Sophia would tease me, saying he got all the good stuff from me, and I'd laugh, feeling lighter than I had in years. It wasn't just about having a kid. It was realizing I didn't need Olivia's approval, didn't need her to tell me who I was. I'd built something real, something better, without her. Standing there in our messy living room, Adrian tugging at my leg, Sophia humming in the kitchen, I knew I had everything she'd said I couldn't. And that was enough, more than enough, for me. Life had a way of moving on, and after Adrian came along, I stopped looking back. Olivia was just a shadow, a memory I'd tucked away in some dusty corner of my mind. I had Sophia, I had my boy, and work was steady enough to keep us comfortable. We'd settled into this little house with a backyard where Adrian could run wild, and I'd spend my evenings fixing up old furniture or tossing a ball with him until the sun went down. It wasn't perfect, money was tight sometimes, and I'd still get those late-night doubts about whether I was doing right by them, but it was mine, and I'd fought hard to build it. Olivia didn't cross my mind much anymore. She'd left, made her choice, and I'd made my peace with that. But life's got this funny habit of throwing curveballs when you least expect it, and I guess I should have known she'd pop up again someday. I'd hear bits and pieces about her through the grapevine, old friends from university, mutual acquaintances who'd drop her name in passing. She'd married some guy named Richard, a big-shot businessman with a fancy car and a fancier house. They had a son, Caleb, and from what I heard, Olivia had turned into one of those moms who live for the spotlight. She'd brag about her perfect little family at every chance, posting pictures online of Caleb's awards, Richard's latest deal, their vacations to places I couldn't even pronounce. I didn't follow her, didn't care to, but people talk, and word got back to me. She's got it all now, they'd say, shaking their heads like I was some sad story she'd escaped. I'd just shrug, let her have her shiny life. I had my own, and it was real, not some polished picture for strangers to gawk at. But there were whispers too, quieter ones, the kind that slipped out over beers when tongues got loose. Richard worked long hours, they said, and Olivia wasn't as happy as she pretended. Caleb was smart, sure, but pushy. Maybe too much like her, always needing to be the best. I'd listen, nod, and change the subject. Didn't matter to me if her world was cracking under the surface. She wasn't my problem anymore. I'd moved on, built something solid with Sophia and Adrian, and that was all I needed to know. Still, I couldn't help wondering sometimes, did she ever think about me? Did she ever wonder if she'd made the right call? Probably not. Olivia wasn't the type to second-guess herself. Then came the wedding. Our old buddy Mark tying the knot with his high school sweetheart, a big party full of familiar faces from back in the day. I went solo. Sophia had a late shift at the school, and Adrian was at a sleepover, so I figured I'd show up, have a drink, catch up with the guys. It was loud, crowded, the kind of night where you lose yourself in the noise, until I saw her. Olivia, standing there in a sleek black dress, holding a glass of wine like it was a prop, talking to some woman I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted, just for a second, but I shook it off. I wasn't that guy anymore, the one she'd broken. I grabbed a beer, found a spot by the bar, and tried to focus on the chatter around me. Didn't work. She spotted me, and before I could dodge, she was heading my way, that old smirk plastered on her face. "Well, look who's here," she said, stopping just close enough to make it personal. Her voice hadn't changed, sharp, like she was always one step ahead. "Still hanging around the old crowd, huh? Guess some things don't change." I took a sip of my beer, kept my face blank, let her keep going. She did, of course. She always loved an audience. Me, though? Life's been good. Richard's killing it. As usual, just closed a deal worth millions. And Caleb? Oh, you should see him. Top 1% of his class, genius level, really. Plays piano like he was born to it. So lucky to have a husband who can give me such a perfect child. She tilted her head, waiting for me to bite, to give her something to twist. I didn't. I just stood there, watching her build her little castle of words, letting her think she'd won whatever game she was playing. I could have walked away, could have let it slide, but something in me, maybe the old hurt, Maybe just the chance to finally shut her up kept me rooted. She kept talking, piling on the details. Caleb's latest award, Richard's new boat, how she'd upgraded from me. I nodded, sipped my beer, waited for the right moment. Then it came. She paused, smirking, daring me to say something. I set my glass down, turned just enough to catch Adrian in the corner of my eye. He'd shown up with Sophia after all, standing by the dessert table, laughing with some kids. I looked back at Olivia, kept. "That's nice," I said. "Here's my son." I nodded toward Adrian, and her eyes followed, locking on him like she'd seen a ghost. She froze, mid-sip, her glass trembling in her hand. Adrian glanced over, waved at me with that easy grin of his, and I waved back, feeling the weight of her stare. She didn't say anything, not at first, just stood there, her perfect little world tilting off its axis. I didn't need to explain, didn't need to rub it in. The truth was right there, plain as day, and she couldn't unsee it. My son, my life, was the answer to every lie she'd told herself about me. And for once, I didn't have to say a damn thing. Reality did it for me. The air at the wedding felt thicker the moment I said it. "Here's my son." And I watched Olivia's whole world shift right there in front of me, like someone had pulled the rug out from under her fancy heels. She'd been standing there, all smug and sure, tossing her perfect life in my face like it was some trophy I'd never touch. And now she was stuck, her wine glass halfway to her lips, her eyes glued to Adrian across the room. I didn't move, didn't say more, just let her look, let her take it in. He was over by the dessert table, picking at a cupcake, his dark hair a little messy from running around with the other kids. He's got my hazel eyes, my sharp nose, even that little smirk I used to flash when I was young and cocky. She saw it too. I could tell by the way her breath hitched, the way her hand shook just enough to make the wine slosh against the glass. For once, she didn't have a comeback, didn't have some snide little jab ready to go. She just stared, and I let her. I could have left it there, could have walked away and let her stew in her own shock, but something kept me planted. Maybe it was the years of her blaming me, the way she'd made me feel like less than nothing, or maybe it was just the chance to see her unravel for once. Adrian looked up then, caught my eye, and waved with that big, goofy grin of his. I waved back, casual as anything, and that's when she finally spoke. This is your son." Her voice was small, shaky, not the sharp, cutting tone I was used to. I turned to her, met her wide eyes, and nodded slow. "Yeah," I said, keeping it simple. "This is Adrian. My boy." I didn't need to gloat, didn't have to. The truth was doing all the work for me. That's when Sophia walked over, her timing perfect like always. She'd slipped in late after her shift, found Adrian in the crowd, and now she came up beside me, her hand brushing my arm as she smiled at Olivia. "Hey," she said, all warm and easy, then looked down at Adrian, who'd wandered over with a cupcake still in his hand. She put a hand on his shoulder, gentle but proud, and added, "Yes, this is Adrian, our son." Her voice was steady, no venom in it, just fact, plain and simple. Olivia's face went white, like she'd seen something impossible, and I could practically hear the gears grinding in her head. She'd spent 13 years telling herself I was the broken one, the reason we'd never had kids, the excuse she'd used to walk out and build her shiny new life. And now here I was, standing with my wife and my son, proving her wrong without even trying. Her hands trembled harder now, the wine glass tipping just enough that a drop spilled onto her dress. She didn't notice, or didn't care. Her eyes flicked between me and Adrian, then to Sophia, like she was trying to solve some puzzle she'd never seen coming. "How?" she whispered, more to herself than me, but I heard it. I could have answered, could have laid it all out. How Sophia and I had a kid without even trying. How it wasn't me who'd failed back then, but I didn't. Let her figure it out. Let her sit with it. She swallowed hard, her throat working like she was choking on the words she couldn't find, and I saw it hit her. All those years, all that blame, all the time she'd told herself she'd traded up, it was crumbling right in front of her. Then Richard showed up, her husband, striding over with that stiff, businessman walk of his, Caleb trailing behind him. He must have seen her standing there, looking like she'd been hit by a truck, because he frowned and said, "Olivia? Everything okay?" She didn't answer, just kept staring at Adrian, who was now smearing frosting on his sleeve, oblivious to the storm he'd kicked up. Richard followed her gaze, landed on me, then Adrian, and I saw his jaw tighten. He didn't know me. Not really. But he knew enough from Olivia's stories, I'd bet. The useless ex she'd dumped for him. Caleb, though, piped up, his voice cutting through the tension. Hey, Dad, that's the kid from the violin thing, right? He pointed at Adrian, all eager and clueless, and I almost laughed. Richard's frown deepened, but Olivia flinched like she'd been slapped. I couldn't help it. I chuckled, low and quiet, and Olivia's head snapped back to me. What? She said, sharper now, trying to claw back some control. I shrugged, still grinning. Nothing. Just funny is all. Adrian had won some big violin contest last month, got his name in the paper and everything, and I guess Caleb had been there too, watching my boy take the prize. Olivia didn't know. She couldn't have, not with how her mouth tightened like she'd bitten something sour. Richard put a hand on Caleb's shoulder, protective, and said, Come on, let's go. His voice clipped. But Olivia didn't move. She just stood there, staring at me, at Adrian, at Sophia, like she was seeing ghosts. Caleb, though, he looked at Adrian again, his eyes narrowing a little, and I caught it. Admiration, sure, but jealousy too. My boy had something his didn't, and it showed. Olivia's perfect little genius wasn't the only star in the room anymore. She turned to Richard, then back to me, her voice barely above a whisper. You have a son. It wasn't a question this time, just a fact she couldn't dodge. I nodded again, slow and deliberate. Yeah, Olivia, I do. And that was it. The moment everything she'd built her life on shattered, right there in the middle of that noisy wedding, with my family standing strong beside me and hers cracking at the seams. The wedding buzzed around us. Laughter, music, the clatter of plates, but all I could focus on was Olivia standing there, her face pale, her eyes locked on Adrian like he was some kind of riddle she couldn't crack. I just dropped the bomb. My son, right there in front of her, and she was still reeling, her wine glass trembling in her hand, her perfect little world tilting sideways. Sophia stood beside me, her arm brushing mine, steady as always, and Adrian was next to her, licking frosting off his fingers, completely unaware of the chaos he'd just caused. Olivia's husband, Richard, had tried to pull her away, his voice tight with that, let's go he'd barked, but she didn't budge. She couldn't. She was stuck, staring at my boy, and I could see the pieces falling into place in her head, the truth she'd spent years running from catching up to her all at once. Then Caleb broke the silence, his voice high and curious, cutting through the tension like a kid who didn't know better. Dad, he's the boy from the violin competition, he said, tugging at Richard's sleeve, pointing at Adrian with this mix of awe and something sharper. Envy, maybe. I couldn't hold back the chuckle that slipped out, low and rough, because this was too good. Olivia's head jerked toward me, her eyes narrowing like she could still claw her way out of this. What's so funny? She snapped, her voice brittle, trying to grab back some of that old control she used to wield like a weapon. I shrugged, keeping it easy, letting her stew. Just funny, I said, nodding toward Adrian. You didn't know, did you? She didn't answer, but her face said it all. Tight lips, a little crease between her brows, the kind of look she got when she was cornered. Adrian had made waves last month, won this big international violin contest, the kind where they put your picture in the paper and send you home with a trophy bigger than your head. I'd been there, front row, cheering him on, Sophia snapping pictures while he played like his little hands were born for it. Caleb must have been there too, I figured, probably in the crowd, watching my son take the stage and walk off with the win. And Olivia, the woman who'd spent years bragging about her genius son, had no idea she'd been outdone by the kid she never thought I could have. The irony was thick, and I let it hang there, watching her squirm. Richard shifted, his hand still on Caleb's shoulder, but his eyes were on Olivia now, hard and questioning. What's he talking about? He asked, his voice low, like he didn't want the whole room hearing. She didn't look at him, just kept staring at me, then Adrian, then back to me, her breath coming a little faster. I could see it, the way her mind was racing, trying to stitch together a story that'd save her pride. But there wasn't one. He's good, huh? I said, nodding at Adrian, who was now chatting with some kid about the cupcakes, oblivious to the mess he'd kicked up. Won it fair and square. Made us proud. I kept my tone light, but the weight of it landed hard. She'd built Caleb up as the best, the brightest, and here was my boy, shining just as bright, maybe brighter. Olivia flinched, just a little, but I caught it. Her fingers tightened around her glass, knuckles white, and she finally turned to Richard, her voice strained. "It's nothing," she said, but it sounded like a lie even to me. He didn't buy it. His jaw clenched, and he looked at me again, sizing me up like I was some threat he hadn't seen coming. Caleb piped up again, all eager. "He played better than me, Dad. I told you about him." Richard shushed him, sharp and quick, but the damage was done. Olivia's perfect son, the one she paraded around like proof of her perfect life, was standing there admitting my kid had beat him at something she'd staked her whole identity on. I almost felt bad, almost. But then I remembered all those years she'd blamed me, all those nights I'd sat alone wondering if she was right, and the pity dried up fast. She turned back to me, her voice low, barely steady. "So you weren't infertile?" The question hung there, raw and desperate, like she needed me to say it out loud. I met her eyes, held them for a beat, and then shook my head slow. "No, Olivia," I said, keeping it simple, letting it sink in. "I wasn't." The words hit her like a slap. She blinked, hard, and took a step back, her heel catching just enough to make her stumble. Richard grabbed her arm, steadying her, but his face was dark now, suspicion creeping in. I didn't need to say more. She'd figure out the rest on her own. All those years she'd spent pointing the finger at me, telling herself I was the problem, and now the proof was standing right here, eating a damn cupcake. Silence stretched out, heavy and thick, and I could feel the weight of her mistake pressing down on her. She'd left me, built this whole life on the idea that I couldn't give her what she wanted, and now it was clear, crystal clear, that I could. That I had. Sophia squeezed my hand, a quiet little reminder she was there, and I glanced at her, grateful for the anchor. Adrian wandered back over, holding out a half-eaten cupcake. "Want some, Dad?" he asked, all innocent, and I grinned, ruffling his hair. "Sure, bud," I said, taking a bite, acting like this was just another moment, not the end of Olivia's world. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, her perfect mask cracking, and I knew she'd never forget this. Neither would I, but for different reasons. For her, it was the moment she lost everything she'd clung to. For me, it was the moment I realized I'd already won. The wedding lights flickered overhead, casting shadows across Olivia's face as she stood there, still reeling from the truth I'd just laid bare. Adrian was my son, and I wasn't the broken piece she'd made me out to be all those years ago. Her eyes were wide, her breath shallow, and I could see the storm brewing inside her, the kind that comes when everything you've built your life on starts to crumble. I didn't say anything more, didn't need to. She'd asked if I was infertile. I'd said no, and now she was stuck with the fallout, her perfect little narrative unraveling right in front of me, Sophia, and half the damn wedding party. Richard was still holding her arm, his grip tight like he was trying to keep her from falling apart, but his face was a mess of confusion and something darker. Doubt, maybe. Caleb stood beside him, shifting on his feet, looking between Adrian and his mom like he didn't know what to make of it all. And me? I just stood there, Sophia's hand warm in mine, Adrian munching on that cupcake, feeling the weight of 13 years lift off my shoulders. Olivia's hands curled into fists, her nails digging into her palms, and she opened her mouth like she was going to argue, fight back, anything to claw her way out of this hole. "But if you weren't infertile, then..." She stopped mid-sentence, her voice cutting off sharp, and I saw it hit her. The realization wasn't slow. It crashed into her like a wave, hard and fast, and her eyes darted away from me, staring at nothing, like she was seeing every moment of our past replay in a new light. If I wasn't the problem, then who was? She'd spent over a decade blaming me, telling herself I'd failed her, using that to justify walking out, finding Richard, building this shiny new life. But now, with Adrian standing here, living proof I could have kids, the math didn't add up anymore. It wasn't me. It was her. I could have rubbed it in, could have twisted the knife and made her feel every ounce of the hurt she'd dumped on me back then. Part of me wanted to. God knows I'd earned it after all those nights I'd sat alone, wondering if she was right, if I really was less than a man. But I didn't. I just watched her, let her sit with it, let the silence do the talking. Her face twisted, just for a second, before she pulled it back, trying to shove that old mask of control back on. Too late, though. The cracks were showing, and everyone could see them. Richard's frown deepened, and he stepped closer to her, his voice low but sharp. "Wait, Olivia, were we ever tested?" He said it like a question, but it sounded more like an accusation, and I saw her flinch, her shoulders hunching just enough to give her away. She didn't answer him, not right away. Her eyes flicked to him, then back to me, then down to the floor, like she was looking for a way out that wasn't there. We didn't need to," she stammered, her voice thin, nothing like the confident snap she'd had earlier when she was bragging about Caleb. Richard's jaw tightened, and I could tell he wasn't buying it. "Didn't need to?" He repeated, louder now, drawing a couple of glances from the people nearby. "You told me he jerked his head toward me. Was the reason you couldn't have kids. You said it was him." His tone was hard, edged with something raw, and I realized he was piecing it together too. All those years, she'd fed him the same story she'd fed herself, and he believed it, until now. I didn't stick around to watch the rest of their unraveling. I'd seen enough. Olivia's pale face, Richard's growing anger, Caleb's confused little frown as he tugged at his dad's sleeve. It wasn't my mess to clean up. "Come on," I said to Sophia, squeezing her hand, and she nodded, her eyes soft but steady, like she knew exactly what this moment meant to me. Adrian looked up, crumbs on his shirt, and grinned. "Can I get another cupcake?" he asked, and I laughed, the sound cutting through the tension like a knife. "Sure, bud," I said, ruffling his hair. "Let's go." We turned to walk away, the three of us, my real family, the one I'd built from the ashes Olivia left behind. She called after me, her voice shaky but loud enough to stop me for a second. "Wait." I paused, glanced back over my shoulder, saw her standing there with her hands half raised, like she could pull me back into her orbit. We can talk about this," she said, desperate now, her eyes pleading. I looked at her, really looked at her, for what felt like the first time in years. The woman who'd broken me, who'd walked out without a backward glance, was standing there begging for something. Answers, maybe, or a way to rewrite the past. But I was done giving her pieces of me. "No, Olivia," I said, calm and final. "We've got nothing to talk about." Sophia's hand slipped tighter into mine, warm and solid, and Adrian tugged at my sleeve, impatient for that cupcake. I turned away, left Olivia standing there with her crumbling world, and walked back to the party, back to the noise and the laughter and the life I'd made. I didn't need to see her fall apart. I'd already won, not by tearing her down, but by building something she could never touch. And that was enough. The wedding music hummed in the background as I walked away from Olivia, her voice still echoing in my ears. "Wait, we can talk." But I didn't stop, didn't turn back, just kept moving with Sophia's hand in mine and Adrian bouncing ahead toward the dessert table. I could feel her eyes on me, though, burning into my back like she thought she could will me to stay, to give her something. Anything, to make sense of the mess she'd just stepped into. But I was done. 13 years ago, she'd walked out on me without a second thought, left me broken and blaming myself, and now here I was, whole again, with a family she'd never dreamed I could have. She didn't get to pull me back into her world, not after all this time. I'd given her enough back then, my heart, my hope, every piece of me, and she'd thrown it away. This moment, this was mine, not hers. Sophia squeezed my hand, her fingers warm and steady, and I glanced at her, catching that quiet smile she always had when she knew I needed it most. "You okay?" she asked, soft enough that it stayed between us, and I nodded, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. Seeing Olivia unravel, watching her perfect little life crack open right in front of me. It didn't feel like revenge, not exactly, but it felt right, like the universe had finally balanced the scales. Adrian darted ahead, grabbing another cupcake, and I laughed, the sound cutting through the weight of the moment. "Slow down, bud," I called, and he grinned back at me, frosting already smeared on his chin. That was my life now, messy, loud, real, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I could still hear Olivia behind me, her voice rising just enough to carry over the chatter. "Richard, it's not what you think," she was saying, sharp and flustered, trying to patch up the hole I'd just blown through her story. I didn't look back, didn't need to. Richard's low, clipped response told me enough. "Then what is it, Olivia?" Explain it. He wasn't yelling. Not yet. But there was an edge there, the kind that comes when trust starts to slip. I kept walking, letting their voices fade into the noise of the party, but I couldn't help picturing her face. Pale, pinched, scrambling for words. She'd grab my arm as I turned to leave, her fingers digging in like she could hold me there, force me to fix this for her. Wait, she'd said, her eyes wide, desperate. I'd looked at her then, really looked, and saw the woman who'd once torn me apart, now begging for a lifeline. No, I told her, pulling my arm free. We have nothing to talk about. And that was it, the last word I'd give her. Sophia nudged me, pulling me out of my head. You sure you don't want to stay and watch the fireworks? She teased, her eyes glinting with that playful spark I loved. I chuckled, shaking my head. Nah, I've seen enough. She knew what I meant. Olivia's world catching fire was a show I didn't need front row seats for. Adrian ran back over, holding out a cupcake he'd snagged for me, and I took it, ruffling his hair. Thanks, kid, I said, taking a bite, the sweetness hitting me just right. He grinned, proud of himself, and I caught his eye, those hazel eyes, same as mine, full of life and mischief. We'd won, me and him and Sophia, long before this night even started. This moment was just the proof. I could feel the crowd shifting around us, the whispers starting to spread, people who'd caught bits of the drama, piecing it together over their drinks. Olivia had always cared too much about what people thought, always needed to be the one everyone envied. Now they were talking about her for all the wrong reasons, and I knew that it hit her harder than anything I could have said. I didn't care, though, not my problem. I'd spent years carrying her judgment, her blame, letting it weigh me down, but I'd shed that a long time ago. Standing here with my family, I was free of it, free of her, and it felt damn good. We moved toward a quieter corner of the room, away from the dance floor and the growing hum of gossip. Adrian plopped down on a chair, kicking his legs, already eyeing the next dessert, and Sophia leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder. She didn't see that coming, she murmured, and I snorted, wrapping an arm around her. Nope. Guess she thought I'd just fade away after she left. Sophia tilted her head up, her eyes warm. Her loss, she said, simple and sure, and I kissed her forehead, feeling the truth of it settle in my bones. Olivia had walked out thinking she'd traded up, but I'd ended up with everything she'd told me I'd never have, a wife who loved me, a son who made me proud, a life that was mine. Back across the room, I could hear Caleb's voice, small and hesitant, cutting through the murmur. Mom, what's going on? He asked, and I didn't catch her answer. Just a low, strained mumble that didn't sound like the Olivia I knew. Richard's voice followed, sharper now, and I figured their night was about to get a lot longer. I didn't turn to look. Didn't need to. I'd given her the final blow, not with anger or spite, but with the simple, undeniable fact of my happiness. She could wrestle with that however she wanted. I was done playing her game. I took another bite of the cupcake, handed the rest to Adrian, and pulled Sophia closer. The music picked up, the party rolled on, and I let it all wash over me, knowing I'd closed that chapter for good. The wedding lights dimmed a little as the night wore on, the dance floor filling up with swaying couples and tipsy laughter, but I was ready to leave Olivia and her mess behind for good. I'd said my piece, walked away with Sophia's hand in mine, Adrian trailing ahead with his cupcake-stained shirt, and I felt lighter than I had in years, like I'd finally shaken off the last of the weight she'd left on me 13 years ago. Her voice, that desperate weight she'd thrown after me, still lingered in my head, but I didn't let it pull me back. I'd given her nothing, no explanations, no arguments, just the sight of my family and the truth she couldn't dodge. Now we were over by the edge of the room, near the big windows looking out on the night, and I could feel the party shifting around us, the air buzzing with whispers that weren't my problem anymore. Sophia leaned against me, her shoulder warm against mine, and Adrian plopped down on a chair nearby, swinging his legs like he didn't have a care in the world. Can we go home soon, Dad? He asked, his voice muffled around a mouthful of frosting, and I grinned, nodding. Yeah, Bud, soon, I said, ruffling his hair. He didn't know it, didn't need to, but he'd just turned Olivia's world upside down without even trying. All those years she'd spent telling herself I was the failure, the one who couldn't give her what she wanted, and here was my boy, living proof she'd been wrong. I didn't need her to say it out loud. Her face back there, pale, stunned, lost, had said it all. And now I was done, ready to walk out of this place and leave her to deal with the pieces. The crowd's murmur grew a little louder, and I caught snippets of it. People glancing toward where Olivia stood with Richard and Caleb, their heads bent together, voices low but tense. I didn't look, didn't want to, but then Caleb's voice broke through, small and shaky, carrying over the noise. "Mom, did you lie about Dad?" he asked, and it stopped me cold for a second, my hand stilling on Adrian's head. Sophia tensed beside me, her breath catching, and I knew she'd heard it too. I kept my eyes on my son, watching him dig into another bite of cupcake, but my ears were locked on that little question hanging in the air. Olivia's answer came, soft and stumbling. "No, Caleb, it's not like that," but it didn't sound convincing, not even to a kid. Richard's voice followed, sharp and low, something about, "We'll talk later," and I could picture him steering them away, trying to hold their perfect image together while it cracked at the seams. I didn't turn around. Didn't need to see her scrambling to explain. Didn't need to watch Richard's face harden or Caleb's confusion grow. The whispers spread like wildfire, guests leaning in, passing the story along, turning Olivia's big moment of triumph into something else entirely. She'd always cared too much about what people thought, always needed to be the one everyone admired, envied, looked up to. Back when we were married, she'd drag me to parties just to show us off, her arm looped through mine, smiling like we were some prize couple. When the kid thing fell apart, she'd blame me to save face, told everyone I was the reason we couldn't have a family. And now here it was, all coming back to bite her, her reputation, the one thing she'd guarded like gold. Slipping through her fingers in front of all these people she'd spent years trying to impress. I felt Sophia shift beside me, her hand sliding up my arm. "She's not going to let this go easy," she murmured, her voice low, and I nodded, knowing she was right. Olivia didn't lose gracefully, she never had. She'd fight to twist this somehow, to make it my fault or spin some story that'd save her pride. But it didn't matter. She could talk all she wanted. The truth was out there now, plain as day, and no amount of words could undo what everyone had seen. Adrian, my son, standing tall and real, was more than she could argue with. "Let her try," I said, keeping my tone steady. "I'm done with her games." Sophia smiled, that quiet, knowing smile, and leaned her head on my shoulder. "Good," she said, and that was enough. Adrian finished his cupcake, wiping his hands on his pants. Sophia groaned, but I just laughed and stood up, stretching. "Home now?" he asked, and I nodded, pulling him into a quick hug. "Yeah, let's get out of here." We started toward the door, weaving through the crowd, and I could feel the eyes on us. Not hostile, just curious, maybe a little awed. People who'd known me back then, who'd heard Olivia's version of our story, were seeing me now, seeing my family, and I knew they were rewriting it in their heads. I didn't stop to chat, didn't need their nods or their good to see you lines. I closed the door on that part of my life the second I walked away from her, and I wasn't about to prop it back open. The cool night air hit us as we stepped outside, Adrian running ahead to the car, Sophia's hand still in mine. I took a deep breath, let it out slow, feeling the last of Olivia's shadow slip away. Back inside, she'd be dealing with the fallout, Richard's questions, Caleb's doubts, the whispers that'd follow her for weeks. But out here, it was just us. Me, my wife, my son, and the home waiting for us, full of love and laughter and everything she'd said I'd never have. I'd shut that door for good, and I wasn't looking back. The car hummed along the quiet road as we left the wedding behind, the glow of the venue fading in the rearview mirror, and I felt this calm settle over me, deep and steady, like I'd finally put something to rest. Sophia sat beside me, her hand resting on my knee, and Adrian was in the back, already half asleep, his head lolling against the window with cupcake crumbs still clinging to his shirt. The night was dark, stars poking through the sky, and I kept my eyes on the road, letting the rhythm of the drive smooth out the edges of everything that had happened. Olivia's face, shocked, crumbling, flashed in my mind for a second, but I pushed it away. She didn't get to take up space in my head anymore, not after tonight. I'd walked away from her questions, her desperation, and now I was headed home with the only people who mattered. This was where I belonged, and I knew it down to my bones. We pulled into the driveway, The little house sitting there under the porch light, warm and welcoming, nothing fancy but ours. Adrian stirred as I cut the engine, mumbling something about wanting to stay up, and Sophia laughed, soft and easy. "Nice try, kiddo," she said, unbuckling her seatbelt. "Bedtime for you." He groaned, but there was a grin in it, and I climbed out, stretching my legs, feeling the cool night air against my skin. Inside, the place smelled like us, like the dinner we'd cooked last night, the faint hint of Sophia's lavender soap, the clutter of Adrian's toys scattered across the living room. I flicked on the lights, kicked off my shoes, and watched as Adrian shuffled toward the kitchen, still chasing one last snack. "No way," I called after him, chuckling. "You've had enough sugar to last a week." Sophia tossed her purse on the counter and started filling a glass with water, her movements smooth and familiar. "He's going to crash hard," she said, glancing at me with that teasing smile I loved. "You might have to carry him up." I nodded, leaning against the doorway, watching her move around the kitchen like it was the most natural thing in the world. This was our life, simple, messy, full, and it hit me how far I'd come from those dark days after Olivia left. Back then, I'd thought I'd never have this, never have a family, a home that felt alive. She'd convinced me I couldn't, walked out with her head high, leaving me to pick up the pieces. But here I was, surrounded by everything she'd said I'd never deserve, and it felt better than any revenge I could have dreamed up. Adrian wandered back in, yawning, and I scooped him up before he could argue, slinging him over my shoulder like a sack of potatoes. "Dad," he protested, laughing, kicking his legs half-heartedly, and I grinned, carrying him toward the stairs. "Time's up, buddy," I said, hauling him to his room while Sophia followed, flicking off lights behind us. I dropped him on his bed, dodging a playful swipe as he grabbed his pillow, and Sophia leaned in the doorway, watching us with that warm look she got when she thought I wasn't paying attention. "Brush your teeth first," she said, and he groaned again but obeyed, dragging himself to the bathroom. I sat on the edge of his bed, waiting, listening to the water run, feeling the quiet pride that came with nights like this. Ordinary, but mine. When he flopped back onto the bed, I pulled the covers up, tucking him in like I'd done 1,000 times. "Good night, kid," I said, and he mumbled something sleepy, already drifting off. I stood, looking down at him. Those hazel eyes closed now, his breathing slow, and felt this swell in my chest. He was everything I'd wanted back when I was with Olivia, everything she told me I couldn't have. I'd believed her for too long, let her words sink in deep, but Sophia had pulled me out of that, given me this life without ever asking me to prove anything. I turned off his light, stepped into the hall, and found her waiting, her arms crossed, a playful glint in her eyes. "You're a softie," she said, and I laughed, pulling her close. "Only for you too." I shot back, kissing her quick before we headed downstairs. We ended up at the kitchen table, just us, the house settling around us with little creaks and sighs. Sophia poured us each a glass of water, and we sat there, talking about nothing, her day at work, Adrian's latest school project, letting the night unwind. Then she grinned, leaning forward. "So how'd it feel, seeing her like that?" I took a sip, thinking it over, the memory of Olivia's stunned face flickering back. "Good," I said finally, honest. Not because she was falling apart, but because I wasn't. "I've got this, you, him, us, and she can't touch it." Sophia nodded, her hand sliding across the table to cover mine. "She never could," she said, and I knew she was right. I didn't care about revenge, never had. Olivia's life, whatever mess it was now, was her own doing. She'd made her choices, built her world on lies, and tonight those lies had caught up to her. Me? I didn't need her to suffer to feel whole. The truth, Adrian, Sophia, this home, was enough, more than enough. I squeezed her hand, stood to rinse our glasses, and felt the last of that old hurt slip away. We climbed the stairs together, checked on Adrian one more time, then fell into bed, her head on my chest, my arm around her. The house was quiet, alive with us, and I knew, right then, I was exactly where I was meant to be. Let Olivia live with her regrets. I had everything I needed right here.